So yeah, I went and I got this coffee bar. My
Mhm.
wife and I have been wanting a coffee bar.
Oh, I would love to get one
So
like
we
that.
went on Amazon shopping around. So how it started was
Mhm.
my own damn fault. Because I went to see my mother, and she's at my niece's house, right?
Mhm.
And she's got this gorgeous coffee bar.
Oh, wow.
I said, I want one.
Uh-huh.
So she sent me the link on Amazon. Well, I bought it. And I just got spent the entire day putting that fucker together. Man, it looks gorgeous, but then
Mhm.
you have to. If people are listening to this,
Mhm.
you're gonna think I'm nuts, but you have to put it together upside down.
Sometimes you do actually. Some shelves are like that too.
That's the second thing I got from Amazon that I had to build.
Mhm.
Both of them I had to put them together upside down
Mm.
because what they do
Mhm.
is they actually start from the top.
Mhm.
Well, in order to do that, the top has to be on the bottom.
Hmm.
So you're building your piece upside down.
Oh, because you got to flip it over, right?
And exactly, that's the key
Mhm.
right there.
Mhm.
And then at about halfway in,
Mhm.
after you get it all framed out,
Uh-huh.
you got to take this mess and flip it upside down, then
Uh-huh.
you start to put it together
Putting
like
it.
the way it's supposed to look.
Oh, wow.
But I tell you what though, for $139,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll take it.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
gorgeous. I'll send you a picture.
I can't wait to see it.
We have we got a guest on the show tonight. We're waiting for him to get here.
Mhm.
In the meantime, how was your day?
It was pretty good actually. The patients were okay, and
Yeah.
but I had this one situation which kind of scared me a little. I had to stay on the phone with this lady. Uh, it was I thought I had to get a police to go do a well check on her, and I thought I had to call the suicide line. It was just so
Oh,
scary. She's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't afford these appointments, and yeah, I know y'all don't take my insurance. And we told her, well, we can do a self pay. Pay
let
what you
me tell
can.
you something. I want to stop you right there because I went through this.
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you something. When you live in a country as wealthy as the U.S.,
Hmm.
and you got to decide whether to eat or,
Right.
or take your medicine,
Hmm.
something's really fucking wrong.
It is. It is very
Okay.
wrong.
And we're going to do a show about that in a couple of weeks called Working the System.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
And I'll tell you more
we're
about
going to
that.
tell people we were going to
Hmm.
actually not do this, but we're going to tell people how to work the system.
Hmm.
You know why we're going to tell people how to work the system? Because
Hmm.
everybody else is working the fucking system.
And I work for a great place that shows you what you can and cannot do. So I'll wait and finish my story on that show because it's a good
Yeah,
story.
well, and I didn't mean to cut you off,
No, 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 no,
but
no.
it's so important when you got to decide
Hmm.
whether to live and die
Hmm.
or eat or take your medicine, then
Hmm.
something's wrong.
Yes.
When you're thinking about suicide because you can't make ends meet,
Hmm.
that's bullshit.
And I was on that call for at least 45 minutes.
You know,
Hmm.
give me that lady's number. I'll send her some fucking money.
Yeah.
I'm serious too.
Yeah. It was just so sad. And I
I'm
told her
serious.
if I have to, I'll call her every day.
I'll send her
Every day.
money.
Hmm.
I'll send her a couple of $100.
Yeah. I told her, I said, if I have to, I'll call you every day. And I want you to look in that mirror and tell
Yeah,
yourself that you're beautiful, you're worth it, just like I will do every day.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. You did the right thing, 100% right thing,
Hmm.
Million.
Yeah. And
So,
people like that just make me just want to cry and just want to go over there to their house and just hold them and hug them and just.
see, people like you are a credit to the medical profession.
Hmm.
My daughter works for an eye doctor. They
Hmm.
had a doctor quit today. Who
Hmm.
does that? Who goes to medical school, you know, optometry school,
Yeah.
right? And quits their job. Who does that?
I
It's
have can answer
2
that.
minutes after 7.
Hmm.
I don't see our guest here. Well, I'll tell you what we're gonna do.
I could tell you that and a little bit more story when we do that show. I'll talk about
Oh, we're gonna do
I
that
have that
show. When do
when
we have that? We were talking about that last night. When do we have that scheduled?
we haven't scheduled that yet, but I know it will be sometime in May that we'll do
It's
that
going to
show.
probably be in May. You're right.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, because I know that we're going to talk about that show a little bit more in detail because I have a lot to say about doctors and offices, how long they stay, and we're going to talk about that. And maybe we can get your daughter to come on the show and talk about her experience as well.
Hold on. I got to send this to Dan
Sure.
Ealey. He's on our website,
Hmm.
and I gave this
The
dope.
link.
I gave him the link to the show,
Hmm.
and I did that 3 days ago so he would have it.
Hmm.
Because people are fucking stupid in Tennessee. Okay, I'm going to say it. They're fucking stupid. I
I
gave
just.
this man a link
Hmm.
3 days ago.
Hmm.
3 fucking days ago. He goes on to our radio site.
Hmm.
That's not where we broadcast from.
No, that's if you want to listen to us.
That's where you listen to the show.
Hmm.
We broadcast from a studio.
Hmm.
Oh,
Right.
oh my God. This
I
is, and I need it this day. You
yeah.
understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Okay, I need
Yeah.
this. Because now I'm fucking fired up.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay?
I had such
People
a
don't, Dan Ealey don't realize what he did.
yeah.
Okay? He got me fired the fuck up.
And my day was just so like weird yesterday and weird today that did you know that I almost sent a link for Charlie to even watch the show? That's how of a mess up day I had.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Poor
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah, I tell you, that's what my frame of mind was. And I was like, wait a minute. Okay, you're
Sorry,
gonna watch
baby.
from
I
up
can't
heaven?
help you.
Are you gonna watch from heaven, Charlie?
Can't help you, kid.
I know. It's like, wait a minute. He can't watch from heaven. Maybe he can. We'll
Come
do a
on,
show maybe
kid.
like
Where
that one
the fuck
day.
are you?
But it
Holy
was like one of
shit.
those days. I was
Oh,
like,
man.
okay.
How the hell is this guy?
I hear something.
There he is.
Yay.
Better late than never.
There he is. Hot
Hey.
damn.
Hello.
Nothing like live radio, folks.
Look,
Dan,
it's the best I could do. I wore this shirt with Paul on it, with the
Uh-huh.
shirt I gave him on his birthday.
Awesome.
there you go.
There we go.
I'm in a pepper state of mind. I'll tell you what, I'm fired up. You got me fired the fuck up tonight. I said, you got to remember, Dan's from Tennessee. They're a little slow down there.
Yeah.
They're a little.
Plus, I just took a nap.
Yeah, they're very leisurely down in Tennessee. I
Jeff-
lived in Tennessee for 14 years.
Yep, so did
Wow.
I.
Dan, whereabouts are you in Tennessee?
I'm in mid-state, about halfway between Knoxville and Nashville and Cookeville.
Yeah.
I know Cookeville very
Yeah.
well. I used to live around Crossville.
Wow.
I lived in Knoxville
Yeah.
for a few years. Yeah.
We're all
Yeah, I lived in
Tennesseans.
Knoxville.
Yeah. My kids
I
were
lived
born
in
there. Hmm.
I lived in Cookeville. I lived in Rockwood, and I
Mhm.
lived in Nashville. But it's funny. I'll tell you something funny.
Mhm.
I bought a house in Donaldson.
Hmm.
My next door neighbor was going to be Bill Anderson from the country.
Yeah, the
music
country
star.
singer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
3 days. You got 3 days. For people to bid you and stuff.
Mhm.
Somebody outbid me, that motherfucker.
Oh
3
wow.
fucking days. I could have had Bill Anderson on one side and little Jimmy Dickens on the other. And if you don't know who those names are, Google, because I think they're both dead now.
Oh, I know who they are. Yes.
Mhm.
Is Bill still with us, or did he go on to the great?
No, I think Bill is still with us.
Yeah.
Is she okay?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, he's a hell of a singer, man. He's a very good
Whispering
entertainer.
Bill. Whispering Bill. Remember?
Yeah,
Whispering-
Bill
yeah,
Anderson.
Whispering-
Yes.
That's what they call him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Whispering Bill Anderson, absolutely. Because you got one very, very mellow. This
Yeah.
guy is like the essence of laid back.
Oh,
By
absolutely.
the way, We've been on for 7 minutes and we haven't even started the show yet.
Yeah.
That's okay. We're warming up.
Right?
Just warming up. All right, you guys ready to do this thing?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Let's fucking roll. It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles, California, 6 o'clock in Chicago, and here in New York City, it's 7 p.m. Hello, everybody. I'm Mad Dog the Scipio. Join us, I am, each and every week. Keep trying to get rid of her, but that fucking comes back every damn time. Amelia, the mouth of the South, Chapman. How are you, Pitbull?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Dan Ealey fired me the fuck up tonight, man. I'm wired. I'm wired. I don't know what the hell they put in this drink.
I think it's that coffee.
I haven't had any coffee today. And I drink
Don't give him
decaf.
any.
Yeah, no, man, don't give me any. No, are you shitting me? Please, I'm wired up tonight. I'll tell you what. Let me tell everybody what happened this weekend. I was supposed to go to Beatle Fest and interview Debbie Greenberg, who owned the Cavern Club. Her dad bought the Cavern Club when the Cavern went into bankruptcy. Her dad bought it and said, how would you like to run the Cavern Club? Now, she's 21 years old at the time, right?
Right.
So I had a meeting set up with her for this weekend. Well, the weather was horrendous, atrocious, awful. It was rain and mud. Okay, it was fucking horrible this weekend.
Oh no!
So my wife and I said, we're not going to risk an hour and 45-minute, 2-hour drive from here up to Hoboken, Jersey City, New Jersey. For a washout. And they had this woman, Amelia, Dan. When I tell you, they had this woman every second of the day. She was doing something.
Oh wow!
So, and I said, I want to wait. I'll wait till she gets back to Liverpool.
Right.
Anyway, so Pitbull, how you doing, babe?
Doing good. Good. Today was a better day.
Today, huh?
Oh yeah.
We're going to talk about it on our next upcoming show.
Yeah. Interesting day.
Sometimes Amelia's job is like a show by itself.
No,
really
we can make our own shows.
It really, really is. Tonight's show, Meeting a Legend. Meeting a Legend. I'm going to try and do my best Paul McCartney impression for you. Dan Ealey. Dan Ealey is my guest tonight. Dan is a resident of Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. And Dan met Paul McCartney. Now, let me see. How does this work? Okay, so you're walking down your driveway, and guy pulls up over, and maybe he's asking for directions or whatever the case may have been. And Dan says, by Jove, you look like Paul McCartney. And he said it just like that.
I wish it was that simple.
Right? Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, you are up in the big camera tonight. So I am going to pull you up here. Introduce everybody. By the way, I'm going to tell everybody, Dan lives in Nashville. So we're close enough to Nashville. We're not going to tell you where the fuck the guy lives. We're just not going to do that. That's not what we do here.
No.
Dan, welcome to What's the Buzz podcast. Tell me, how the hell did you meet a legend?
Well, it started on February 9th, 1964, when I went to the movie theaters with my Cub Scout group.
Mhm.
Right.
And before the movie started, this kid in my class named Mike Nichols said, "Hey, Dan, are you going to watch the Beatles tonight?" I said, "What's the Beatles?" He said, "Just watch Ed Sullivan tonight."
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I did. And then my life changed like everyone else.
Yeah,
Fast
brother.
forward to 1974. My dad was a guitar player and
Mhm.
a singer, and I learned to play guitar early. And I had been recruited to join a band as a bass player when I was 12, and I was playing in bands at
Yeah.
12 years old. So, and the Beatles was the band for me, and Paul McCartney was the man. And
Mm.
so
Yeah.
I had followed him all through grade school, all through junior high, all through senior high. And now in 74, I have my own band. And I pick up the newspaper one day, and there's a little blip in the Nashville paper that says Paul McCartney rumored to
Hmm.
visit Music Row. It was a tiny article in like a gossip column.
Mhm.
I said,
Yeah.
Paul McCartney is coming to Tennessee. I'm going to meet him. Now, the next day, I pick up the paper, and there's a photo of Paul and Linda and the kids getting off the plane and on the tarmac at the Nashville airport.
Oh God,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Sure.
I had to come up with a plan. I
Mm.
subscribed to Melody Maker magazine from the UK.
Oh
And
sure.
Mhm.
to subscribe to that was pretty involved. You had to send your
Yeah.
international
Mhm.
money order. You had to wait forever for it to show up, and it was expensive.
Oh
Mhm.
sure.
I decided if Paul's in Nashville, he's going to have a press conference at some point. So
Mhm.
I'll pretend to be a reporter. But wait a minute. How can I do this? And I picked up my Melody Maker magazine and I opened the front cover, and in the editorial column, it
Yeah.
said United States editor Chris Charlesworth, and it gave his phone number in New
You know
York.
what, Dan? If you had known me then, I could have just gave you my press card.
Yeah, that would have made it a lot easier.
There you
But
go.
what happened? Yeah,
And I
exactly.
have an extra. I have an extra too.
Well, you can send it to me for the next time then. But
Exactly.
so
Right.
I dial up the number in New
Exactly.
York, and Chris Charlesworth answers the phone. And I said, "My name is Dan Ealey. I'm a stringer reporter in Nashville. Paul McCartney's here, and I want to cover him for Melody Maker magazine." He
Mhm.
says, "Do you
That's
have
pretty
any?"
ballsy, brother.
He said, "Do you have any experience?" And
Mhm.
I didn't want to talk about that because the only experience I had was I had wrote a music column for my high school newspaper.
Yeah.
I said, "Of course I have experience, but I'm going to need a letter from you authorizing me to represent Melody Maker."
Sure.
And so he said, "That's not a problem." On the 9th of June, I received my letter. So I started calling around music circles in Nashville trying to find out any hint of anything. And this was top secret.
Yes, it was.
So they told
Mhm.
me, here's what I found out. He's staying in Wilson County. He's
Mhm.
on a farm, and it's a mansion, and it's on
Huh.
Franklin Road.
Yep.
Now that's the three pieces of information I had.
Hmm.
So the following Sunday, I get in my Ford Torino station wagon.
Mhm.
I took my Rickenbacker bass. I grabbed my letter from Chris Charlesworth from Melody Maker, and I headed out about 10:30 in the morning to rural Wilson County, and I got on
Yeah.
Franklin Road. And I'm
Mhm.
driving up and down the road looking for this mansion, and said it had a swimming pool. So all I see is regular bungalow houses. I don't see anything that strikes me as Paul McCartney's going to be staying there. So I get to a certain point where I give up, and I'm going to turn around and go back home. I thought if I see anybody, I'll ask them. But I'm in rural Wilson County on the back roads on Sunday morning, and there's nobody out there except I see one man He's a farmer in overalls. And I thought, he is not going to know anything. I'm going to ask him, but I'm not going to mention the name the Beatles to him. So I eased up to him. I reached over to my passenger side door and I rolled down the window. And I leaned over and I said, "Sir, can you tell me where there's a mansion at here on Franklin Road with a swimming pool? It's supposed to be a doctor's house." He immediately said, "There's not one." I said, "Are you sure? There's a doctor's house, a large house with a pool?" He said, "No, there's not one on Franklin Road." I said, "Well," now I felt like I had no choice. I said, "Well, sir, one of the Beatles is supposed to be staying there." He said, "You mean those fellas from England?" I said, "Yes, sir. The Beatles are from England." He said, "Well, they're staying up Junior Putnam's place." I said, "What? Where is that?" He said, "It's on up the road here a piece, but they don't have a swimming pool." I said, "Okay, how far do I go? How close am I?" And he gave me a little bit of insight, and I turned the car around. And
Dan, can I
Yes, sir.
interrupt you for a second, Dan?
Yes, sir.
If you guys are familiar with Tennessee, and I know the area Dan is talking about, if you live in this area, Amelia, everybody knows Junior's Farm. Everybody knows Junior's Farm. Okay? The place is legendary, and it's even more legendary now. But continue, Dan. I want everybody to kind of give a little perspective of the geography.
So my plan is I'm going to do a drive-by, and I look to the left and I see what now I know has to be where Paul is staying, because it's a mansion on a hill looking over 133 acres, and it has a big entrance. So I pass by the entrance, and I'm going to pull in the next driveway of a little bungalow house right beside the entrance. And I'm going to back out, and I'm going to do a slow drive-by back, and I'm going to check this out. But when I pull in that driveway of the house next door, I see Denny Lane and Jimmy McCullough out on the lawn.
Oh, shit.
So I stop and I grab my letter and I exit the car. And I said, "Hi." I said, "Hey, Denny and Jimmy, I'm Dan Ealey. I represent Melody Maker Magazine, and Chris Charlesworth sent me." And they didn't say anything. They were just staring at me. And I said,
well, probably because Denny was high as a kite at the time.
Yeah, he was like, okay.
I said, "You know who Chris Charlesworth is, don't you?" And Jimmy said, "Yeah, I know who Chris Charlesworth is." And I said, "Well, hey, I got this bass guitar in the car. You want to see it?" And he said, "Yeah, get it out." So I get out my Rickenbacker, which is what Paul is playing at the time. And Denny straps it on.
Oh, wow.
And
That's hilarious.
He starts dancing around with it. And he says, "Hey, Paul would love this."
Oh, wow.
I said, "Okay, well, give it to him." And I leave the bass. And this was the first day in my beginning of this 3 weeks that I'm going to end up hanging out with them. So every day then I would go down and I would take gifts every day. I was taking shirts for the kids, gifts for the band, some liquor for the band, guitars, magazines, and records. I would sit around the table with the band at the guest house. Now, the band was staying at the little bungalow
Right.
at this point, and Paul was up at the mansion.
Of
Well,
course.
I would sit around with the band, wait for an opportunity to talk when they were having breakfast. And one morning, they were having breakfast, and I waited for a little pause in the conversation. I said, Denny, when you were in Nigeria working on Band on the Run, you had a beard. Why did you shave your beard? Jimmy looks up and he looks at them and he goes, he knows more about us than we do. And so I started becoming friends with them and coming and going every day. I would just enter the house when I got there. It wasn't locked. And I would hang out till they showed up. And I started eventually recording their rehearsals. I was hearing, look, you have to understand, at this time in 1974,
Yeah.
Paul McCartney has not played live in America since Candlestick Park in August of 69.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm standing outside the garage.
1966.
I'm sorry, correct, 66.
Yep. Yeah, because
I'm
that was the
standing
last
outside
concert they played.
I'm standing outside the garage and I'm hearing Jet, Band on the Run, My Love, Little Woman Love, Maybe I'm Amazed. I mean,
Wow, doing all the hits.
Wow.
I'm hearing it all. And then eventually I start hearing this song I've never heard. And they were working through it slowly, meticulously. And to be frank with you, I was a little bit bored because I didn't know this song. It's like they didn't know it either. And they were working out the parts.
Sure. Yeah.
So Denny comes down after the rehearsal and I said, Denny, what was that song that you kept playing over and over and over? He said, oh, you'll find out later.
Yeah.
And that became that. What I found out later was that in October of 74, WLS Radio in Chicago premiered this new song by Paul McCartney and Wings. And I pulled my car over and listened and waited for John Records Landecker to play it. And it was Junior's Farm. So they tell me now that I became the first person to hear Junior's Farm outside the band. It wasn't fully written when they got there.
People don't understand something. I'm going to give you a heads up, Dan, because I haven't told you anything about me. But my background, I've only done two things in my whole life. Only two things. I was a recording engineer. I used to record bands. That's what I did. And I was a wrestling promoter for 25 years.
Okay.
And I will tell people, if you guys have ever been to a recording session, there's a lot of sitting around waiting for shit to happen.
Yeah.
It's, because especially if it's new material, you could spend like a day on one song.
Oh, yeah.
It's really tedious. But when you got guys like Jimmy and Denny Lane, and Paul is a fucking legend, and an incredible musician. When you got guys of that caliber, they can knock out, a new song, 2 or 3 a day, and get through it. But when you're recording, especially new music, you could sit around for hours waiting for shit to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So how long into the session did you get like, I got to get out of here, I got to do something?
Never.
Really?
I always hung. I was living my dream. I mean, the Beatles at that time and Paul was gods from some far off land.
Yeah.
All we got was the videos. All we got was the videos on the Smothers Brothers or something,
Yeah.
And
Sure.
now I'm there with them. I see Paul driving in and out of the driveway, and he got to where he would stop and talk to me at the driveway in the car. So, look, I was very careful to not take too many my friends down there. And
Mm-hmm.
the guy that I play in the band with still today, I was playing in the band with in '74, and he's a
Right.
huge Beatles fan. Am I going to let this moment pass and not take one of my best
Right.
friends to
Mm-hmm.
meet Paul? So I
Right.
go to his house one day on the way to Junior's farm, and I haven't decided if I'm going to tell him. I'm on the fence about it. And
Mm-hmm.
he comes out to the car, and I said, well, I was hesitating. I was looking at him. He's about 6'5". I was looking at him. I said, well, you want to go meet Paul? He goes, yeah, I'd like to. I said, let's go. So we jumped in the car, got on the interstate. About halfway down, it was in June. It was very hot, and I had a flat tire in my Ford Torino station wagon
Oh no.
on the interstate. And we get out, and we're sweating bullets. And I tightened that last lug nut, and I looked up at him, and I said, do you just want to go back? He said, we might as well go on. I said, okay. I threw the lug wrench in the back of the car. We loaded up. And when we pulled in at what we know now as Junior's farm, I went into the bungalow, and my friend Billy stayed outside. Now, from where his perspective was in the yard, the house was up on the hill, and the driveway was straight. So you could see any car coming down the road, the driveway.
Sure.
All of a sudden, he runs in to the house, and I'm talking to Jimmy and Denny and Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, come on, Paul's coming down the driveway. So I had a camera. Now, in '74, you either had a cheap piece of crap camera or you had an expensive one. And I had a cheap 16 millimeter little spy camera.
Sure.
I couldn't remember how many frames I had left on the cartridge, right? So I grab a cartridge out and I slam it in and I run to the entrance. And Billy's right behind me, and Paul and Linda's coming down. And he eases up in the car and he stops, and Billy's standing behind me. Paul rolls down his window and he goes, how you doing, Dan? And I turned to Billy like this. I went, and Billy whispers, Paul McCartney knows your name. I said, if I ever write a book, and I'm thinking about it, I'm going to call it Paul McCartney Knows Your Name.
I gotta tell you something.
That's a great title.
Amelia, you know what I'm about to tell Dan.
Mm-hmm.
We are huge Beatles fans on the show. Friends of ours that have been on the show a few times have written books about the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
We know several people. In fact, I've written the foreword to 3 Beatles books already.
Mm-hmm.
One of them a bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I'm talking about, Mil.
Yes.
And so, Dan, I will tell you that if you ever want to write a book, I'm the go-to guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me know.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you some questions.
I'm
Oh,
going to
look at that.
show you
we're
this.
actually
If I
gonna
get the
see
lighting
some of
right.
this.
There we go. On the left is me with the bass in 1974. I bought it from Manny's in New York.
Yeah.
And if you notice, because it's important on what I'm going to tell you in a little bit, do you see 2 marks on the body of the bass? One's right above my hand, a notch.
Uh-huh.
And then down below my hand, below the pick guard, you see another dark spot.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's going to be important what I'm telling you. But here you see me actually handing the bass off I gave it to Denny, and he's giving it to MPL's man, Paul's right-hand guy there, Alan Crowder. He's handing the bass off there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, here's my friend Billy sitting in the yard. Just a minute. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in the yard. He's the blonde-headed guy between Denny and Jimmy.
Right.
And he's sitting there with his Les Paul. I think this bringing the guitar thing that we did, and there we are with Denny a couple of years back.
Uh-huh.
But I think the bringing the guitar thing, the musician thing,
Mhm.
Yeah.
broke the ice for me. Now, here's
Absolutely,
what
dude.
Oh,
happened one
yeah.
day. I
Mhm.
came down almost every day, but one day I show up and I'm talking to Jimmy, and he says, "Hey, Dan, it'll be better if you don't come down tomorrow." I'd never had him tell me that, and I
Mhm.
said, "Well, why? What's going on?" He said, "It'll
Mhm.
just be better if you're not here." I
Mhm.
said, "Okay." So the next day, I stayed home, and we had a terrific electrical storm here in Tennessee that night.
Right.
Oh,
Mm.
so I didn't go, right? The next day, it's
Mhm.
Mhm.
another day. I'm
Sure.
loaded up and I'm headed back to the farm. And when I pull in the driveway and go in the house,
Mhm.
Denny and Jimmy are bringing cases of champagne in these milk crates with ice.
Wow.
And I go over to the window at the house and look down at the picnic pavilion, which is about 400 feet from the house, and I see a couple of cars pull down there. I have a pair of binoculars on,
Mhm.
and 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 I get down there and I see Paul, and he's wearing this shirt. Well, it's not this one.
Uh-huh.
There's a picture here somewhere of it, but
Uh-huh.
he's wearing a shirt that I gave him, and I holler to the others, "He's got my shirt on. He's
Mhm.
got my shirt on." Jimmy goes, "Dan, look, we're having a little get together
Mhm.
and we're having a party." He said, "It's Paul's birthday." He said, "Paul wants us to work the gate, but we don't want to. We want to
Mhm.
go to the party, but you could do it." I
Mhm.
said, "What's work the gate mean?"
Mhm.
He goes, "Well, you'll let people in that should be in and you'll keep everybody else out." And I said,
Exactly.
"Well, how will I know who to let in?"
Mhm.
You'll
He
know.
goes, "You'll know.
Exactly. You'll know.
It's gonna be Roy
Uh,
Orbison,
uh-huh.
Chet Atkins,
Yep.
Oh,
and
wow.
Jerry Reed. And if you'll do this,
Uh-huh.
then we'll take you down to hang out with Paul." I said, "Okay, let's do it." So I go down to the entrance
Mhm.
and I'm waiting. It's hot. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon.
Mm.
About 300 feet from the entrance, I can see the gathering. Chet
Mhm.
Atkins' white Cadillac is pulled up out there. And
Yeah.
suddenly I see a Porsche rolling down the road, signaling to turn in. And I get up on my tiptoes and I look, and it's Roy Orbison.
Mhm.
And as he's turning into the driveway, I peer in his Porsche, and he has all leather on. He has leather coat,
Yeah.
black,
Oh.
leather pants, black,
Black.
black t-shirt, big
Mm.
black glasses. His hair
Yep.
is all jet black. It's
Mhm.
100 degrees outside.
Yep.
And I'm thinking,
That's what brother Roy Orbison was cool.
hey,
Mhm.
that's what I said. As I peered inside his car,
Mhm.
I thought, wow, how is he standing? Then I thought, wait a minute. It's more important to look cool
Mhm.
than to be cool. And
Be
that's what
cool.
Roy's doing.
Absolutely.
Right?
So so I figure at some point,
Mhm.
Denny
Mhm.
or Jeff or Jimmy are going to walk through the field and they're going to come up and get me. And that's what I'm ready for. And I'm watching.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, I see somebody leaving the party and they're walking toward me. And I look and it's Paul.
Mhm.
And he's got the shirt on I gave him. And he
Mhm.
walks up to me and he says, "You're the one that gave me the bass." And I
Mhm.
said, "Yes." He said, "It would be silly for me to keep it." I said, "Okay." So we
Mhm.
walked together back down to the party. By this time,
Mhm.
it's only Roy Orbison there, and me, Linda, Paul, Denny, and Jeff. And they got a little music going. It's very low key. Linda's got a peasant dress on. She's in the middle. Denny's on one side, Paul's on the other, and they're sort of swaying back and forth. And that's the atmosphere. And
Mhm.
I get to talking to Paul. Now, you have no idea if you've never done this. If you've been this crazy super fan of Paul for all your life, and now
Yeah.
you're standing toe to toe with him,
Yep.
it's a mind boggling thing.
Very intimidating.
Yes. And I said, hey, Paul, I said, when you guys broke up, some of my friends went with John, and some of my friends went with you. I said, we actually had falling outs and
Wow.
hung up on each other over the phone over this.
Over the Beatles, yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine having that? But I got away from him for a few minutes to not smother him. And I was talking with the others, and suddenly Jimmy hollered and he said, hey, Dan, Paul's hollering for you. And I turned around, and Paul and Linda had got into the rental car, which is pulled down in the grass next to the pavilion. And Paul was waiting. I mean, this just is how he was. He was waiting for me to come over to tell me goodbye. That's just the way, how nice he was. And he said, I said, Paul, are you going to watch Yellow Submarine tonight? It's on Nashville TV. And he said, well, I don't know. I don't know. But that was his birthday party, June 18th, 1974. And I lived this dream of being able to be there with him, with him wearing the embroidered shirt that I gave him. And,
and wore it several times
after. Up
after.
here, actually, somewhere. What did I do with that? I'll have to find the picture, but but he was wearing the shirt, and then this picture of it right here.
Oh, wow.
This picture is 2 years later on his birthday once again.
Yep.
At the LA Forum, but you see how it's all embroidered.
Yeah. Oh, he's worn that shirt several times.
Yes.
He sure hell has. Yep.
What I put over here on this side of the collar that you can't see, I had Paul embroidered in red on the collar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, they tell me that he keeps everything, so maybe we might even see it again. Would you like to see the bass?
I would love
I would love to, yes.
I got to tell you, this is one of the easiest interviews we've ever done because I haven't asked a question yet.
Would you like to ask a question now?
No, I want to see the bass first.
Oh, you want to see that first? Oh, wow.
Man.
Look at
Oh,
that.
that's sweet.
That's beautiful.
Now, let's talk about those markings.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
All right. Do you see those?
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Let me tell you how I'm gonna look bad on myself in this part of the story. But when they left and went and left Tennessee, I came back to my hometown and I sold the bass to a gospel bass player who was in his 40s. I don't know. You just don't think of it when you're 19. And my friend Billy, who I told you about going down with me, I'm having to rehearse with him every weekend, and I'm having to hear about it. I'm having to hear from him. Right there, he is in the cap and the red jacket. How I shouldn't have sold it.
Right.
So I decided to call the man I sold it to up and try to get it back. So I called him. I said, hey, I sold you the bass, but could I buy it back from you? And he said, I wouldn't take anything for that bass. Paul McCartney played it.
Oh, man.
So, man.
Now, in my hometown, it's a small town. You don't have to know. Call him and ask him if he still has this.
Yeah.
You can ask friends.
Sure.
Hey, does he still have the bass? This goes on for decades. And in 1995, I pick up my local newspaper and his obituary is in the paper.
Oh, my God.
Now, look, I was sorry that he passed away.
Oh, of course.
But I did have an interest in the bass.
Absolutely.
And so one day I called up his daughter and I left her a message to call me. And she called back. I said, hey, This is Dan. I sold the bass to your dad. I'd just like to come by one day for 5 minutes and strap it on, play it. I had a lot of emotions tied up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Could I come by and play it one last time? And she said, well, Dan, when Daddy passed away, it went to his sister in Nashville. I said, oh.
Oh,
She
wow.
goes, yeah. And she, without warning, fell dead one day.
Oh, dear God.
Oh, no.
And it went to her daughter. And either her daughter or her boyfriend pawned it.
They
We don't know what
Oh,
happened to it.
no.
So,
It ended up at a pawn shop in Nashville.
Oh, no.
not exactly, but you're
Oh.
close. So I said, well, what's her name? Now, for those of you, and most people don't know this, I've owned a detective agency for 35 years.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so I get her name and I look her up about 16 miles from here.
Mhm.
And I left her a message to call me. And she called me and said she didn't have any idea what happened to this bass.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you find it, I'd be interested in buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mhm.
never heard from her again. Now, Billy at the time, he's with me, and I tell him it's all over. It's over. It's gone.
Yeah.
You're never going to see it again. It's over. And I said, besides that, I didn't
Mhm.
write down the serial number when I bought it in 1974 from Manny's. How would we know if we ever found it? He said, let's look at it.
Yep.
He
All right.
said, you're lucky. He said, it's
Mhm.
got 2 identifying marks that are usually not on them.
Mhm.
Right.
If we ever run into it, we'll know that's it. He said,
Absolutely.
I'm going to take a picture of you with it in 1974.
Yep.
There's the marks.
Mhm.
And I'll put it on my iPad in case I run into it. And I turned around and looked at him. I said, what? In case you run into it?
Uh-huh.
He goes, well, you never know. I'm out. I'm a salesman. I'm in
Mhm.
shops. I
Absolutely.
said, listen,
Yeah.
you're not going to run into this base anywhere. It's over.
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead and put it on your iPad in case
Mhm.
you run into it. So, fast forward to May 19th of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Almost 42 years later.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, Billy and I collect guitars. And if he's in some shop somewhere and he sees a bass that he likes, he thinks I might want, then he'll call me. And our deal is to call 3 times in a row.
Mhm.
And that means it's urgent. I'm
Right.
on my back porch talking to an insurance company at 10:30 that morning, and
Mhm.
Billy's calling. And I hung up on it. I didn't accept the call. I continued with the insurance company. He calls the second time. I again send him to voicemail. He calls the third time. And I tell the insurance company, hey, I got to go. Let me take
Right.
his call. And
Mhm.
my phone goes off that Billy has left me a message, but I don't listen to it. I just return the call. He answers. I said, why are you blowing up my phone this morning? He said, if you're not interested in this bass, I've found I may just buy it myself. I said,
Oh.
okay. All right, what have you got? He goes, well, the donut shop in town.
Mhm.
Yeah. He goes, the pawn shop across the street. I said, Chris. He goes, yeah.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
said, I just walked in there. And as soon as I walked in, Chris said, hey, Billy, you think Dan might be interested in a bass? I've been meaning to call. He said, I don't know. He's got several. He's got several, including a bunch of Hofner basses.
Oh my Lord.
He says, what is it? He
Mhm.
said, well, it's a Rickenbacker. He goes, okay, what year is it? He goes, we looked it up, and it's a 1974. He goes, okay, now what color is it?
Mhm.
He said, it's maple. It's been in here over 10 years. He
Oh
said,
my
What?
he goes,
God.
what? 10 years? How's that possible? He said, look, it came in. We had it back in the warehouse. I got a large warehouse, and a big truckload of stuff came in the next day, and we moved everything.
Oh no.
And we forgot about it. And Daddy found it yesterday,
Oh my gosh.
and he set it out.
Fucking kidding me?
Oh
Listen,
wow.
I was back in that warehouse one day looking at a piano, and I'm in the same room with the bass and don't know it.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
So he goes, so it's been in here 10 years. He goes, yeah, but we sold it yesterday.
What?
He goes, what? He goes, let me go out and get my iPad. Billy goes out in his car. He said it took me a few minutes, and I got the iPad, and he said I stuck that picture up in his face. The picture, this one.
Yep.
Well, he said I stuck that up in his face, and he went, that's it. That's the bass.
Mm-hmm.
He said, look, the guy I sold it to is not a musician. He sells us, no, he buys from us gold and silver. But he'll buy a guitar to flip. Do you want me to call him right now and see if he's got it? Billy said, give him a call.
Yeah.
Now, look, this shop does not know anything about the Paul McCartney story with this bass.
Good.
All right. So they call the guy, says, hey, man, calling about the bass you bought from me yesterday. Do you still have it? He goes, yeah, I still got it. He goes, you want to sell it? He goes, that's what I bought it for. He goes, well, there's a guy here and in town. If that's his original bass, he's probably going to buy it from you. I'm going to call him and give him your number. He goes, okay. So they call me. Now, look, I've already replaced that Rickenbacker with a blonde 1974 similar bass. And I've decided in my mind, I put that to bed. I buried that and I moved on. Now they're telling me this and I'm not convinced. I said, okay, I'll call this guy.
Yeah.
They gave me his number. So I called him. I said, hey, this is Dan calling about your bass. Look, if that's not my bass with the two distinguishing marks of a picture I'm going to send you, I don't want it. I've already replaced it. So can you send me a picture of it? He goes, it'll be tonight. I said, what? I said, couldn't you just take a picture of it now? He goes, I live in Smyrna and I'm not there right now. And it's probably going to be tonight. I said, could you call somebody at your house right now? Have them open the case and just take a picture. They could send it to you. You could send it to me. He goes, no, man, it's probably going to be tonight. I said, okay, look, here's my number. I'm going to send you a couple of pictures and show the marks. Please get back to me. So I hang up and I go, I own 20,000 albums. So I went and I started digging through those albums just to get my mind off this bass. Absolutely. In about 20 minutes, my phone goes off and I'm going to show you the exact photograph of the text that I received. It's right there. I ran home to shoot you pictures. I said, oh man, I think it's mine. He said, it looks like yours. And this is the guy. Right.
Incredible.
There. Wow.
Wow.
So I call Billy.
That's nuts.
I call Billy and I sent him the picture. Billy said, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. We found the bass. That is it. I said, listen, I got to calm down a minute. And I got to call this guy. And I got to buy this bass. I'll call you back in a minute. So I called the guy. I said, well, yeah, that looks like mine. I said, I made him an offer on it, what market value was. I said, if you'll meet me in Lebanon, Tennessee, right now, I'll pay you for it. He lived in Smyrna. I lived in Cookville, and Lebanon's right in between.
Yep.
So we're going to meet halfway, and that's where Junior's farm was. So
Yep.
he said, okay, we'll just text and coordinate.
Yep.
So I pull up there, and he's got the hatch of his vehicle open, and I see the case inside. Now you must understand that you see his car in the background and me
Yes,
standing
sir.
there with it. You have to understand that I haven't seen this bass in 42 years.
Yeah.
And so I acted a little strange. I said, hang on a second. As I got to the back of my car, I paused to rest. I said, hang on a second. He goes, okay. I said, no, you got to understand, I've not seen this in 42 years. I said, okay, let's look at it. So he pulls up the case and he opens it up, and I'm going to disappear from the camera a second because I got something to show you.
Remarkable.
Wow.
Unfucking believable. I'm fascinated.
Me too.
There's this blue notebook laying in the case, and he reaches for it, and I reach for it, and we open it, and it has gospel sheet music.
Oh my God.
And it says Stephen Street Baptist Church, Cookeville, Tennessee. And right here it says Mr. Stringer right there, and that's the man I sold it to. This was still in the case.
All the original papers. Oh
wow.
And so then I get it.
That's crazy.
And look, here's what I have to point out to you and your listeners at this point.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Billy was with me the day that I handed that bass off to Paul McCartney. How does he walk into a pawn shop in my hometown 42 years later and discover this? Play the Twilight.
I'm going to tell you how. I'm going to tell you how. You believe in serendipity? You believe?
Yes. Yes.
I'm assuming you're a spiritual guy.
Oh yeah,
brother. Let me tell you something. We have seen Amelia. Please tell me if I'm lying over. Listen to me. I want people to understand. We've come to you before with stories like this. People think we make this stuff up,
but we do not.
You have heard a man for the last hour tell you a journey of a bass guitar, a Rickenbacker bass, for almost 43 years. This guitar took a journey, but it took a journey to find Dan Ealey again.
Made a complete circle.
People came full circle.
Yes.
People don't understand that that's how spirit works.
Yes.
Everything comes full circle, brother.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Absolutely. So here's what happened then. Paul had kept the bass for 3 weeks. According to Jeff Britton, it was a problem for Paul. He tells it, if you go and search Dan Ealey, Paul McCartney, Dan Ealey, Jeff Britton, Dan Ealey, Denny Lane on YouTube, you'll find this. Jeff is talking about it. He said the bass was a problem for Paul. He had it up at the garage. He was playing it. And he couldn't bring himself to deprive a fan of his instrument. So he kept it for 3 weeks, and he decided it would mean more to you if he kept it and played it and returned it to you than if he just took it. Now, people will ask me this. They'll say, why did you not have Paul McCartney sign that bass?
Oh, you'll ruin it.
Look, I was 19. This bass was new, and this, for me, was a lot of money at the time.
Yeah.
I was standing in the field at Junior's farm with this around my neck, and I was going to ask Paul to sign it. And I looked down at it like this. Where will I have him sign it?
Yeah.
And I suddenly thought, well, I could have him sign it on the back. But then I said to myself, I don't want him messing up my bass.
Exactly.
Now, if I had had him sign it, and it had gone on that journey without me for 42 years, I would have never got it back.
Nope, you sure wouldn't have.
So I'm thankful.
The story is cemented by the fact that he played it. He actually held it and played it. You're talking about a musical genius, a legend, played that guitar.
Here's what people say, Mad Dog. They say, why would you give Paul McCartney a right-handed bass when he's left-handed? Well, number one, it was Denny that suggested I give that bass to him, because Denny knew that Paul can flip them and play them. There's many examples. If you do the deep dive into Paul McCartney, you'll see him playing many instruments. He's on the plane during the Wings tour. He's got a Fender jazz bass. It's strung right-handed. He's got it flipped upside down and playing it. In the Rockestra documentary, he walks over to the bass player. He says, let me see your bass. I'll show you your parts. And he flips it over and plays it. And so Denny knew this. So now look, after all these years, I've got this bass back, and it's really, I cannot describe to you what that meant. So
I will tell you what, and I've been waiting a long time to hear the first-hand account of that story. The story of Paul at Junior's farm is legendary.
Yes.
Amelia, it's your favorite part of the show. You ready for it?
Yes.
We have a little thing, Dan, we do here called Show and Tell. Let's take a look.
Yay.
You guys do your homework. I'll say that for you. So, I track Denny down after that, and I book a gig, and I tell him I've got the bass back. And I have this huge poster blown up. I'm getting it. Denny's just been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm backstage with him. And I said, Denny, I got the bass back. He said, let's see it. He says, how do we know it's the same one? We pull out the poster.
There you go. Yes.
Immediately, he says, there's no doubt about it. Now, I said, Denny, you and Ringo, once you guys get in the Hall of Fame, you probably won't sign autographs anymore. I know that you're going to tell me you can't sign. He goes, oh, I'll sign for you. So I said, well, Denny, now you've been nominated, and guess what? You've been laminated.
There you go.
Yay.
Beautiful.
So I get Denny to back here and poses with me after 42 years. You saw the photo. And then I decide I get Denny to sign an affidavit about the bass.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I get Billy to sign an notarized affidavit about the bass.
Yep.
There's one guy I want to get it signed by who they tell me is impossible to get.
Paul.
Jeff Britton.
Oh, Jeff.
So I knew that Jeff left in 95. He'd sort of been laying low all these years. And I knew where he was. I tracked him. I used my investigative skills. I tracked him down in Spain. I knew where he was. It took me 4 years. 4 years. But the problem was I knew where he was, but I couldn't get him because he wasn't on social media.
Yeah.
So how am I going to get this guy? And I finally see a guy in Spain, a Spanish guy who says he's playing in the band with him. And the guy's on Messenger. And I go to Messenger and I sent a picture of me with Jeff. And I said, I understand you're playing with Jeff Britton. I would love to reconnect with him. I was friends with him at Junior's Farm. He said, I'll be seeing him tonight. I said, could you tell him about me, please?
Right.
He said, yes. I wake up the next morning, the light is on Messenger, and the guy is there. And I immediately grab my phone. They're 6 or 7 hours ahead. I'm barely out of bed, and I'm texting him, hey, did you see Jeff last night? He says, he's with me right now.
Oh, wow.
And he remembers you. Here's his email address. So I start emailing. We go through this long process of reconnecting.
Yeah.
I email. 4 or 5 days later, I hear from him back and forth. And I tell a couple of my friends, hey, I'm talking to Jeff Britton again. They say, you can't be. He doesn't talk to anybody. Well,
apparently he does.
He does talk to you.
So eventually I get his phone number and I call him up. After I sent him all about the bass, and he talks, and I recorded the conversation, and he tells me all about the bass and what he remembered about it, about Paul playing it, about it being a problem. And we reconnect our relationship after all these years. I used to call him in the UK. I had his phone number. I'd call my method was I'd call his mother. She would tell me where he is.
Yeah.
And give me the number. I called once and she said, he's at the studio with Paul, Dan, here's the number. And I call, and Jeff comes to the phone. I'm on the phone talking. He said, I better go. Paul's looking for me. So I'm interrupting their recording sessions. But I eventually get the guy who played with Paul on Junior's Farm, and I get him to get on a plane in Madrid. And he comes here.
Right.
He plays with my band. The other thing that happened at that gig with Jeff Britton here and at my house, Jeff Britton was here on my drums, is there was a guy showed up at that gig from Nashville named Jonathan Pushkar. He's a young kid, up and coming guy in the music business. He was talking to Jeff and he was playing him some of his music. And Jeff said, the only problem is I'm not playing on any of that. Jonathan said, well, we'll correct that in the future. So sometime later, maybe a year later, Jonathan's record label is going to have him record Junior's Farm, a cover. And Jonathan tells me about it. He said, I'm going to get Jeff to play on it. And I said, hey, I would love to play the Rickenbacker bass on Junior's Farm. Do you think we could do that? He said, well, the record company's got REO Speedwagon's bass player lined up. I said, well, that's okay. I understand that. But something happened, and about 3 months later, I get the call, and he says, hey, do you still want to play bass on Junior's Farm? And I said, yes. He said, then get in the car, bring your bass, and come.
Oh, wow.
So I go down there, and I use the bass, and I play, and now – to show you how bizarre this whole journey has been, I'm playing on the record with Jeff Britton using the bass that Paul gave back to me. And I'm the first guy to hear Junior's Farm anyway. So
amazing.
I called up Jeff in Spain after that. I said, Jeff, how is this possible? I met you. I was 19, and you guys were my heroes.
Yeah.
How is it possible now? 42 years later, I'm playing on Junior's Farm with you. Now, you guys know, because I think you did all your homework. You know, I also recorded them rehearsing, right?
Absolutely, sure.
I recorded 2 hours of them rehearsing down there, and I've sat on this tape for 49 years now. So Jeff comes to Tennessee, and I'm going to take him back to Junior's Farm. Me and Billy have him in the car, in the van, and Jeff's in the back. And I have, without any knowledge. He has no knowledge of this. I have the CD of my live recordings of them rehearsing in the garage in their band.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way back, Billy and I cooked this up. I said, Billy, it's getting kind of boring in here. Let's listen to some music. And he throws in the CD.
Yeah.
And I said, Jeff, that sounds like you playing. And he sat up on the back of his seat. And he said, that's absolutely incredible.
Wow.
And so I actually have the first recording of Junior's Farm that I recorded in June of 1974, but they did not go to the sound shop in Nashville till July 9th. So I have this. Now, you guys know about the new documentary.
Yes.
The Man on the Run.
Yep.
Well, I want to change it to Dan the Man on the Run because that's what they all call me. But I got in touch with the producer, and I sent him a couple of links. I won't tell you my techniques. I didn't stalk him, but I did use some skills to finally get to him. And I sent him 2 of my links on YouTube, which you guys should go check out there in the radio land, because you can hear snippets of my recordings on one.
I already have, my friend. Already
you
have.
had. And when I sent that link to the producer, and I get a email saying, I work for the producer of the new documentary, and he wants to know if you're available for a brief phone call on Monday. Do you know how long the phone call was? An hour and a half.
I was going to say probably at least a 2-hour call.
Right.
Jeff Britton said they can't do Nashville without Dan Ealey. It's impossible, because he says, I know more about it than anyone. I appreciated him saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
But hey, I was just a fan, and I've had this relationship with them. Now Denny and I have our own wine. Did you see the wine?
I did. I have to tell you, I have a new Denny back in the day, back in the 80s. In 1987, he was a guest at my club in New Jersey. And after the show, we were there with the Denny Lane and Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Yeah.
And hanging out, drinking and telling stories. And he got onto the story of Paul being arrested in Japan in 1980. And he says, in that, and he had a couple drinks in him. He goes, they had the wrong fingerprints on Paul. I said, well, what do you mean they had the wrong fingerprints? He goes, they weren't his prints.
Uh-oh.
When Paul was arrested in Germany, his prints went to Interpol. So your fingerprints never change. Well, when they fingerprinted him in Japan, they were different prints. So what he was trying to tell me was maybe them rumors that Paul died in 1966 might have been true.
Yeah. Hey, I was talking to Denny backstage at one of his shows before I got the Rickenbacker bass back.
Right.
And the subject matter was the Rickenbacker.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and then I sort of walked away from Denny. I was talking to one of his friends that was there, and suddenly Denny blurted out, he wouldn't let me keep it. I looked over at him. I didn't know what he was talking about. A few minutes had passed. I said, what? He said, he wouldn't let me keep it. I said, who wouldn't let you keep what? He said, Paul wouldn't let me keep the bass. He said, after he decided he was going to give it back to you, I wanted it.
Oh,
and
my
Paul,
God.
And he said, Paul said, there's only going to be one Rickenbacker in the band, and I play it.
Oh, jeez.
And that's a very musician-y thing there, but it was very
Oh, my
candid
God,
of him.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But,
So-
brother, I know. Look,
Mhm.
I've recorded enough bands to know everybody's got their favorite instrument.
Mhm.
They got they each musician that every musician I've ever known has had a unique sound,
Mhm.
a particular, what they call, Amelia, what they call a tone
Yeah.
Mhm.
on, I'm going to put a tune on my instrument. I'm going to put
Yeah.
a tune on on my
Yeah.
axe, on my,
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
it's
We have a
like
guitar. Mhm.
Paul, for example, has a very
Mhm.
heavy hand
Yeah.
Yep.
when he plays the bass.
Mhm.
George Harrison, when he played the guitar, had a very um, kind of almost orchestral sound to his guitar.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. I'm guessing that because you're such a fan of Paul, that you, Dan, probably have a heavier hand, a heavy right hand.
What I do is I muffle the strings just like Paul muffles the strings with his
Yes,
hand.
he does. Yep,
Mhm.
sure does.
And I've done it naturally all my life. I mean, I've owned over 100 Hofner basses, including 3 signed by Paul. I was a
Hmm.
Hofner dealer at one time. I've owned original 61 Hofner. I had 2, one signed on the body. I mean, I was playing the Hofner bass in the 60s when
Mhm.
if you didn't play a Fender or a Gibson, you were considered a third-rate
Oh, I
musician.
know.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll
But
tell you what, Paul did for Hofner what what Harley Davidson did for motorcycles,
Mhm.
yes,
because everybody wanted that, that giant bass violin.
Mhm.
I
You
have
know.
about 10 of these mid-60s ones.
Mhm.
This is a 1966.
Well, if you got a piece of crap you want to get rid of, you could
Yep.
throw it my way. I'll
Right.
spend time restoring it.
Hey, I was
Mhm.
going to show you this picture of the wine.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you how this got started. When I would see Denny at shows, I
Yep.
would take him a bottle of Elvis wine.
Uh
What's
huh.
Elvis wine? Well, it's just a bottle of wine with Elvis on the label.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
he loves Elvis, but he wasn't a big fan of the wine. And
Right.
so I got to giving it to him anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
this guy in Chicago messaged me one night and he said, "Hey, I'm going to see Denny tomorrow night." He said, "Is there anything you want me to say to him?" I said, "Go to the liquor store and get a bottle of Elvis wine." He said, "For
Mm-hmm.
what?" I said, "Because he doesn't like it, but that's what I give him." And
Exactly.
so if, if you look up, if you
Mhm.
look it up on YouTube, you'll see the guy
Mhm.
backstage with Denny,
Yep.
and Denny says, "And you're still sending the wine," and he points
Yeah.
to the. So I was going to see him February 3rd in Nashville backstage, and I
Mhm.
Right.
knew because I know Denny so well that he thought I was going to pull out of my bag a bottle of Elvis wine.
Mhm.
And so I had this wine custom made in California
Mhm.
Beautiful. Junior's
with me and
Farm.
Denny
Oh
on it.
wow.
So
Denny and it says Denny and Dan on it, Amelia.
that's what it says. And I pulled it out
Mhm.
and he had a blast with it. You can see, I think that's on
Well, I
YouTube
got
too.
news for you, Dan. I know Denny well enough to know that he's going to have a blast with any kind of wine you stick in front of him. Because he is funny about. Let me tell you something, Amelia.
Mhm.
About and then Dan is absolutely right. Denny Lane
Mhm.
loves wine. He's not a heavy drinker. He's once in a while he'll sip on it like a scotch.
Mhm.
Once in a great while he'll have like a little a little like a brandy and a snifter. But
Mhm.
he loves him a bottle of wine.
Mhm.
And
Well,
the sweeter the better.
Yes, I love red sweet wine.
Now, your wine, is it a dry wine? Is it a sweet wine?
the first one it's not available commercially,
Right.
but it was a Cabernet.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
I had Denny sign the first bottle. I've got it here.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave him one. And I don't sell it, but I give it around to people that help me do things for me, and
Sure.
you know
Mhm.
that are fans. And And it's been a lot of fun having that.
That's
Next year is the
beautiful.
50th anniversary. I'm thinking about putting a stamp on it that says the 50th anniversary.
Oh wow.
But let me say
Yeah.
this about these guys:
Yeah.
Jeff Britton, Denny Lane, Paul and Linda. Look, they've been fabulous to me through the years.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, when Paul was coming to Knoxville, Billy said, "Are you going to go? Are we going to go see him?" And I said, "I'm not going to go, not unless I'm going to get my bass signed, because the seats I want are too expensive. They're $3,000 each for the 10th row." And
Yeah.
I said, I'm just not going to. I'm just not going to go. Well, I had messaged a guy in the UK named David Stark, who is on the.
I actually know who he is.
Okay, he's on. He's
Yeah.
at all the graduations with Paul,
Yep.
wearing the robes and everything.
Yep.
And he gave me a contact with MPL about talking to them about getting my bass signed.
Right.
And he messaged me about 2 weeks from the concert. It had been 6 months since I had reached out to him. He said, "Dan, did you ever hear anything from MPL on getting your bass signed?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, I'm going to be in Nashville next week. Would you like to get together, see if there's any way I can help you?" He said, "There's a guy at the Nashville named Don Cusick going to pick me up at the airport, and I'm going to have lunch." I said, I did not know David Stark, but I had his phone number, and I'm texting this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so shocked by what he just said that I pick up the phone and I dial his number. I said, "Did you say Don Cusick is picking you up at the airport?" He goes, "Yeah, do you know Don?" I said, "I did an album in 1978 that a band that I managed, and Don had never done anything in the music business, and he was living in Cookville. And I met him at my dad's gas station in November of 1972. He was driving a Volkswagen van. He had noodly blonde hair, and he wore an Army fatigue jacket. And I became friends with him. We played a couple of coffee shops, and I needed somebody to bounce ideas off about this album that was not a yes man. And I recruited Don Cusick. Now Don went on to write 26 books on the music industry.
Yep.
He's on the board of directors of the Studio B, Mike Kirk Foundation. He became a music professor at Belmont in Nashville. He's a songwriter. He's everything. And I said, he's on PBS all the time.
Yeah.
And I finally, when the internet came around, I took that album of my band called Ambrose. It was called Bust Your Nose. They was a rock and roll band. And
Right.
we put one on eBay, and it brought $500. And I said,
Right.
"How is this possible?" And we put another one on that brings $400. So we messaged the guy that bought it. He said, "I bought it because it's in a record collector's guidebook."
Yeah.
And so I look up Don Cusick. I've not talked to him in 40 years. And I called him up. I said, "Don, it's Dan Ealey. Don, I want to ask you something." I said, "I know you have all these achievements. You've wrote 26 books. You're a publisher. You're a writer. You're on PBS. You're on everything. But Don, not one thing you've done in your career will bring more than that Ambrose album I recruited you for from the gas station at the pumps at my dad's gas station in 1972. Don, one question. Please answer yes or no. Did I not discover you at the gas pumps at 19 West Spring Street in Cookville in November of 72? Did I not discover you, Don?" And there was silence. And there was a little voice that said, "Yes, you did."
Yes, you did.
Yep.
So listen, I tell Billy, there's some omen going on here. This David Stark is coming. He knows Don. We got to be there. Let's get the guitars and go meet him. We took him to Junior's farm. We took him out to eat. We told him the whole story. And I said, "Listen, COVID's going around. Paul's going to be in Knoxville. I don't think I need to put the responsibility on you to try to get the bass signed. Look, I'll travel anywhere in the world with this bass for 5 minutes with Paul. If you can do it at the Liverpool Institute, I'll go. If it has to be in London, I'll go. So I won't put the pressure on you." So he says, okay. He leaves and goes back to the UK. In about 4 days, I get a message from him. He says, "Dan, something's happened, and I can't believe it, but then I'm not surprised either." I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "I got you $2,000-$3,000 tickets as a guest of the band."
Whoa.
He said, what? He said, I got you two $3,000 tickets.
Oh
for
my
nothing."
gosh.
So
Mhm.
that poster that you showed in there
Yeah, I sure did.
is
Mhm.
right here. I always come up with a plan.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
Yeah.
I had this blown up on a architectural printer and
Mhm.
laminated. And we go back to the parking lot behind the facility, and Paul's driving in. And he's got his window down, and I'm 10 foot from him. And he points at me, and he grins. You can see it on YouTube. He points at me, and he grins. Now, we get inside. We're at the 10th row, and I talk to security. I have this folded up. Why you see all the creases in it is you were not allowed to have anything this big in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I folded it up. I smuggled it in under my shirt. And
I love this guy. He's fucking
I
great.
know, right? You're
and I
talking
got to
about
talking to security for my section. It was a lady. And I
Mhm.
explained to her my history. And I said, I've got this huge poster crammed under my shirt. She goes, well, don't get it out till the lights go down. So when the lights went down, I got it out. We moved to the 3rd row. And Paul cuts the lights on, and he starts reading the signs, and he points, and he says, I met you at Junior's farm. Yes, we did. We recorded Junior's farm right here.
Mhm.
And so, hey, it was great to have.
Incredible.
I
Wow.
commandeered him twice in one day that day.
Mhm.
But listen, I went to Paul's office in London. I've been to his farm in Scotland.
Hmm.
I've had this great history with him, and all I say is I'm just a fan. Now, what happens is, when Buddy Holly died,
Yeah.
his parents in Texas had one of his Stratocasters that they would bring out when the fans would knock on the door,
Yeah.
and they would let them play. People come here because I knew that story, and I pull the Rickenbacker out. And I don't wait for them to ask. I say, you want to play the bass that Paul McCartney played, don't you?
Right.
Let me
Absolutely.
make a picture with it. Because I thought that was such a great thing that Buddy Holly's parents did, I mean, where else are you going to get a chance to play an instrument that Paul McCartney played? When I met Paul at the farm the first time, I came back to my hometown to a concert that was going on here, and I told all my friends, I just met Beethoven. I said 1,000 years from now, when we're all dead and gone, who can you meet in your life that will be remembered? Who do you know in your life that you've met that are going to be remembered in 1,000 years?
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, I met Jimmy Page when I was
Mhm.
12. He was with the Yardbirds. I met him.
Yep.
He said he hoped he never came back to Cookville.
Yep.
And he was on the Caravan of Stars show. Neil Diamond kicked me out of his dressing room.
Amelia, tell Dan who I met.
Who we met was Sylvia and Lacey J. Dalton.
No. Tell Dan who I met.
Who you met when?
Uh-oh.
That
You
you've
are
met a lot of
horrible
people.
co-host.
You've met a lot of people.
I've talked about it on the show many times. I met Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley, yes.
Oh.
He's met a lot of people.
Well, I got married at Graceland.
Really?
Did you?
But I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
Billy and I are huge Elvis fans too. We say this: Elvis was the man, but the Beatles was the band.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a room in my house that's all Elvis.
Amelia's husband worked at Graceland.
Oh wow!
He was the groundskeeper.
Yeah, for a little bit. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's been this was the best show we ever had.
It was great.
Oh,
We'll have to do it
didn't
again.
Have to ask a single fucking question. It was great. It was amazing. I want guests like Dan all the time.
All the time, right?
Dan, I want you to promote your social media. Tell everybody where they can find out about the Paul McCartney story. You got TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all your.
I run a couple of pages on Facebook. My page is Paul McCartney and Wings at Junior's Farm. I would invite you to join there. I also run Wings at the Speed of Sound.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
then you can get really a lot of stories, a lot of details on YouTube just by putting in. You got to spell my name right, Dan, Ealey,
Yep.
and they'll come up, and you can hear Jeff talking about the bass. You can see some inside stuff with Denny. I
Mhm.
loved being here on this show tonight.
Thank you.
Well,
For
thank
having
you.
me.
Well, I'll tell you what, we do Beatles shows frequently.
Mhm.
As I said, I've forwarded 3 Beatles books already.
Mhm.
I've hosted more than probably 18 hours of Beatles programming here.
Yep.
And I consider myself, humbly, I consider myself kind of an expert on the Beatles.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
went to the Cavern. Do you remember when Bill Heckle owned the Cavern?
Yes, sir.
I was on the way to London, and I was on the plane and getting off the plane in London, and he called me. He said, "Can you come on to Liverpool today?" I said,
Mhm.
"Well, that's all the way across the country." He said, "Dan, it's only 2 hours by train.
Yeah.
It's not America." I said, "Okay." I said, "What's
Exactly.
going on?" He said, "Pete Best is playing here for the first time in 20 years, and
Yep.
I think you need to be here." And
Mhm.
so I take the train on to Liverpool,
Yep.
and I got to hang out with John Lennon's Uncle Charlie.
Yep.
I recorded Pete Best band playing, and I met Alan Williams.
You were
And
hanging out were you at the museum there, at the Beatles Museum?
I went to the museum, but I was at the Cavern Club. Yeah.
Okay, Karen, sure.
Mhm.
Then
That's
Danny actually got in touch with me and invited me in 1996 to come to one of his shows there. I had not seen him since
yeah.
74, but I couldn't figure out how to get there without renting a car. So I went on to the farm in Scotland.
I would love to have Denny on the show.
Mhm.
I would love to have him here because
Yeah.
he's a character. He really is. He's a fucking character.
I'd like for you to
Um,
have him. I'd like you to have Jeff Britton sometime too.
well, I'll tell you what, hook me up, bring him on.
Mhm.
Come on with him.
Yep.
Well, next year is the 50th anniversary of Junior's Farm. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, I know.
And
It's
who knows
crazy.
what's going to happen? Look, Curly Putnam that owned the farm,
Mhm.
he invited me a few years ago to come back to the farm. And I
Yeah.
went through
Oh,
the
wow.
gates, sat there. We talked about all that. And I said, "Curly, what was it like having Paul and Wings renting your house?"
Yeah.
He said, "Dan, to be honest with you, I needed to pay the mortgage." He
Yeah.
said they tore up a few things, but they paid for everything.
I'm
Mhm.
sure they tore up
Oh.
a few things. I'm sure.
He
Mhm.
said
I'll tell
they
you what, man.
he told me they hid the motorcycles. He said, "Dan," he said, "we hid the motorcycles in the barn." He said, "But Paul found them on the first day and I was riding them all over Wilson County."
Yeah. He loves to do shit like that.
Mhm.
He like
But listen,
people
he
think,
was wonderful to me, very
yeah.
nice. I got to meet my heroes,
Mhm.
and they've continued this relationship with me
Yeah.
for 50 years. Now, Denny
It's
said,
hard to imagine. It's hard to
Mhm.
think in terms of that.
Mhm.
Now, Amelia, you're just a young pup. You were
Uh-huh.
just a baby, in
Well,
1974. Just to give you an idea, Dan, she was 3 years old in 74.
mhm.
Okay. I am, of course, you and I are in that same age bracket that we will not fucking mention,
"That's right."
and we're going to keep it that way. But I will tell you that it's hard to imagine in terms of 1974 was 50 years ago,
Yeah.
49 years ago, right
It's okay.
now.
He's telling my age. That's okay. I'm just kidding.
Okay,
No, but
a
because of you, Angelo,
long
I got to
time.
meet my hero thanks to you.
Well, look,
Yeah.
that's easy. I know people up and down Music Row in Nashville.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Up old. I mean, we had Lacey J's been on the show. Sylvia's been here. We've had, oh my God, who the hell else has been here?
Oh, yeah.
I got like brain fog right now.
Mhm.
You know, I went to a show where Denny was in concert. I hadn't seen him in many years, and I went
Mhm.
backstage and talked to him.
Mhm.
And Billy was telling me, he said, in the car, Billy was with me, and he pulled out this vintage leather guitar strap. And I said, "What are you doing with that?" He said, "I'm thinking about giving this to Denny when we get there." I said, "Let me look at it." He holds it, and it's orange, and it has big Tennessee letters like for the football team.
Oh,
Balls,
get out.
Tennessee balls.
But it's vintage. And I said, "Okay, well, turn it over." I'm driving down the interstate, and I said, "Turn it over." I said, "Let's get an ink pen and sign our names on the back."
There you
So
go.
we get there, and we go up to see Denny, and Billy's in front of me, pulls out the guitar, says, "Denny, I want to give you this." He goes, "Okay, I won't be missed in this." And he flips it over, and he goes, "What's this?" Billy said, "Well, no, that was Dan's idea." He said, so he says, "What about it?" And I said, "Well, Denny, you know how we're always coming to you? We're going, 'Oh, Denny, will you sign this? Denny, will you sign that?' I thought we should sign something for you."
There you go.
He said, "I don't think I've ever had that happen before." Now,
Mhm.
what he did at the concert, he plays a song. I'm out in the audience, and he stops at the end, and he says, "There's a guy in the audience tonight who showed up at the farm pretending to be some reporter or photographer or something." And he said, "We haven't been able to get rid of him for 40 years, but
Years,
there he
right?
is."
Amelia, what do we got coming up next week?
Well, actually, tomorrow we're gonna be. I mean, actually, Monday, April
Tomorrow ain't
10th.
doing shit tomorrow. I'm going to church
I
tomorrow.
keep thinking that we're still doing our shows different nights, but actually, we started doing our shows on Mondays and Tuesdays. So
I
April
need to
the
go to
10th,
church tomorrow because I dropped a lot of F-bombs.
You did, yes.
April the 10th on Monday, we're gonna be doing a show on Bob Saget's passing.
Oh,
The mysterious death of
Yes,
Bob Saget,
wow.
entertainer, comedian, stand-up. Yes, was he murdered or did this thing just play out as a terrible accident?
Yes.
Wow.
We're going to investigate the deep dive into the death of Bob Saget.
And
Well,
Tuesday, April 11th, and we're going to be doing a show on runaway parents, not runaway
I may have to get involved in that.
There you go.
Absolutely. I tell you what,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people are speculating that there's foul play here.
Yeah.
A lot of people, knowledgeable people, in
Mhm.
fact.
Yeah.
Far beyond the rumor mill here now.
It is very far beyond the rumor, yes.
Because we don't propagate the rumor mill here. We take the factual information and then we go with it. Tuesday,
Yes.
runaway parents. Yes, it's a real thing.
Yes.
It's no longer the kids running away.
It's the parents.
The
Wow.
spoiled, rotten brat throwing the stick over his back with the knapsack, going, "I'm going to run away from home." Well, now it's the parents leaving the kids in the home. In fact, leaving them the home.
Yes.
How
With
about
barely
that
any
shit?
food and whatever they have there.
Yep.
Mhm.
Runaway parents. People are just tired of being parents anymore.
Mhm.
What else we got coming up, Neil?
And then after that, we're going to be doing a show we're going to be doing our shows on Mondays and Tuesdays from now on, as we were telling everyone. So we decided to do on the 17th, celebrity time travel. You'd be surprised.
Have they been here before? Well, I'm going to show you compelling evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that maybe perhaps they have. Time travel is real. We know this now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah,
Gonna be a good one.
and then of course we're gonna have the show we're going to be doing on. Let's see. We decided to go ahead and let me rant a little bit more about politics.
You're going to rant? Absolutely. Sure. And mysterious celebrity deaths.
Yes.
Did Elvis die of a heart attack or was he murdered?
Yeah, that's on the
Was
24th
it
and 25th.
suicide?
Mm-hmm.
Who killed Marilyn? How deep are the Kennedys in this?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very deep.
We're going to be
They're
talking about
ass
that.
in this.
Anne Heche, we're going to talk about that as well.
Anne Heche, was she murdered or was it an accident?
Mm-hmm. That's going to be coming up
We
for
got
the
a lot
rest
more.
of the month of
Michael
April.
Jackson is the king of pop still alive and hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
Strong evidence, not circumstantial, by the way. Strong, tangible, physical evidence. to support the fact that Michael Jackson may very well be alive and well and hiding in plain sight.
Too much information people are wanting to hide, but we're going to find it for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, folks. It's been a rough and tumble couple of weeks.
It has been.
Fun. This was the exclamation point over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, yes.
And thank you, Dan Ealey. You, my friend, are
Thank
a
you.
welcome guest here any damn time you want to come back.
Thank you.
And if you just feel like talking, that's okay too.
Uh-huh.
Remember this from Wings,
Dan,
right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to seeing you guys again.
For
Thank you.
Dan the Man Ealey.
Yeah.
For Amelia, the Pitbull Chapman. I am the Mad Dog. I'm Angelo. Take care. We'll see you next time on What's the Buzz, America's podcast. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.